there is no planet B. Clean water is growing scarce. Food production is wasteful. Resources are less sustainable. Not a single one of us can escape climate change. Not a single one of us can fix it. But working together, our ideas get bolder. Our solutions are stronger. Our impact is bigger. This is the Call for Code Global Challenge. Join a community of 400,000 developers and innovators. Build your skills on open source technology and fight the effects of climate change. You could win $200,000 and have your solution deployed to communities in need by IBM, the Linux Foundation, and a global network of partners. There's only one planet Earth, but countless ways to help save it. Together, we can answer the call.
Since 2019, IBM and CGIU have engaged more than 70,000 students from around the world, in person and virtually, especially more recently, to tackle pressing challenges that affect all of us, from natural disasters to COVID-19. This year, as all of those challenges we face have just grown all the more urgent, IBM and CGIU are once again partnering for the Call for Code Global Challenge, with an emphasis on the University Challenge to engage students who are committed to finding solutions to one of our biggest threats ever and to truly an existential threat for our planet, climate change. Effectively addressing the challenges that have been created or exacerbated by climate change requires diverse perspectives, people with different areas of expertise, all working together. And this year, students around the globe will work to tackle specifically environmental justice by developing innovative technology-based solutions. They will compete for a $10,000 grand prize through areas focused in 3 specific subcategories: water, zero hunger, and worldwide production and consumption. As a judge of last year's University Challenge, I was left so optimistic by the real-world applications that had been created so quickly and yet still so purposefully by the teams who participated, including the winner, PandaMap, an app developed by a team of students from across the world who were all studying at the University of California, Berkeley. It uses crowd and different data to alert users of heavily trafficked areas that should be avoided on campus and which locations are comparatively safer. I certainly can't wait to see the results of this year's challenge and just continue to watch and applaud, to be grateful, to be in awe of the ways in which all of you are marshaling your brains, your talents, and your energies to build a future that is stronger, more resilient, safer, more sustainable, more meaningfully inclusive for everyone.
Thanks. I'm Wayne Frederick, president here at Howard University. Welcome to the Call for Code University Challenge, Howard Hackathon for Environmental Justice, presented by IBM and the Clinton Global Initiative University. It has been such a privilege for Howard to host the 2021 CGIU annual meeting and all of the programs associated with this very important event. This is very much a point of pride for our institution. Not only has it been a distinct honor to host so many luminaries and leaders who have made a tremendous impact throughout the world, but we don't take lightly the opportunity to engage with future world leaders like all of you, especially during a global moment as significant as the one we're living through right now. You have certainly left an imprint on Howard University, and I hope that your time here at Howard, even if you only experience our institution virtually, has affected you as well. I'm extremely excited to witness the creative, innovative, society-changing ideas you all come up with during the hackathon. This hackathon isn't just a competition or a theoretical exercise. These ideas have the promise and the potential to make a real-world impact. Yes, you are all competing against each other for the $10,000 grand prize, but more significantly, you're working together to make a difference. One idea alone will not change the course of our planet's environmental crisis. It requires an abundance of ideas and a groundswell of support. Real change requires every one of you. I am also eager to see the many different ways you all approach these issues. The diversity of our participants will undoubtedly help generate a wide variety of ideas. And there are over 100 registered participants for the hackathon, representing more than 10 countries other than the US, including the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Kenya, Indonesia, China, Malawi, and Zambia. The participants also hail from many different states within the United States, such as California, New York, Florida, Illinois, Arizona, Nebraska, and New Hampshire. Diversity is a critical driver of ideas. It prevents groupthink, but it also empowers teams to think about new constituencies and audiences. It also allows groups to draw on a broader set of experiences that can translate to novel ideas and new ways of thinking. Whenever our society becomes narrow-minded, it is because of a lack of diversity and representation among the key decision makers. We should always be seeking to bring in as many different people from as many different backgrounds as possible. A thriving society requires a diversity of diversity. Especially when considering global problems, we cannot discount the importance of that diversity. In so many ways, it is fitting that this hackathon focused on environmental justice is taking place here at Howard University. While Howard is a historically Black college and university and HBCU, we still are an extremely diverse institution. We have students and faculty from all across the country and all over the world. Our community is home to people of many different races and ethnicities and religions. Numerous languages are spoken on this campus. We also seek to be a welcoming place where all people can feel comfortable being their full selves. And I hope all of you feel this way as you virtually visit on-campus community. In addition, Howard has a long legacy of generating leaders and society transforming ideas, something that is vital for our institution in particular and higher education in general. I have always appreciated the Clinton Global Initiative's emphasis on ideas. It is appropriate that the meeting and events like the hackathon are hosted by institutions of higher education, because colleges and universities are so often the source of ideas that change the world. Whether the ideas come from students, faculty, or staff, there's something about the atmosphere of an institution of higher education that allows for this sort of transformational, paradigm-shifting thinking to take place. Even during the pandemic, when something of what makes higher education so special has been lost or altered, we are showing and demonstrating that the generation of powerful ideas has continued. There's too much at stake in the world today for colleges and universities to hit pause on creating the ideas that will shape our futures. Environmental justice is a perfect theme for the hackathon at Howard University. For 154 years, Howard has been leading a caravan of social justice. It began in 1867, 2 short years after the Civil War ended, when we started educating recently freed slaves who were moving from the South to the North. From within our nation's capital, Howard was giving these individuals the opportunity they could not have gotten anywhere else to participate more fully in society and in our national economy by gaining vital skills and knowledge. The legal theories that proved decisive in the Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 were developed on Howard's campus. Thurgood Marshall, our esteemed alumnus from our law school, was an instrumental figure in the case, and he certainly leveraged his Howard education at the time. But when the legal team was compiling their case, they chose to work at Howard and to be inspired by this historic place when they were trying to make history. They left nothing to chance in their efforts to convince an all-white panel of justices to overturn precedent and declare that separate is inherently unequal. Probably the first major legal hackathon. And of course, Howard is in the business of educating vice presidents as well. Kamala Harris, the first female, first Black person, and first individual of Asian descent to occupy the office of the Vice Presidency of the United States, came to Howard to receive the education she needed to go out into the world as a crusader for social justice. We are immensely proud that she should be the first Howard Bison in the White House, though we are confident that she won't be the last. There's a long legacy of social justice here on this campus, and recently Howard has added sustainability and climate change to our list of social justice initiatives. When we talk about social justice, we most often talk about what we need to change. But what we cannot overlook is what we must also keep the same. Social justice does not only require transformation, it also requires preservation. Any hope for our world to change for the better requires us to maintain its natural resources. Climate change is threatening and has already begun to reshape our world in destructive and devastating ways. Temperatures are rising, and our natural habitats are struggling to adapt. This is both a slow-building crisis in the making that we must monitor for the sake of our future, as well as the origin of numerous sudden and unpredictable catastrophes that take place every day. As with so many crises in our country and around the world, Black and brown people are likely to bear the brunt of pain from climate change. And unfortunately, it's already happening. We've seen it during the recent power outages in Texas, when communities of color went the longest without power and without access to safe water. We have witnessed it throughout the coronavirus pandemic, when the death rate among Hispanic and Black populations was 2 to 3 times higher than their white neighbors. Too often, communities of color are disproportionately affected by the damage and are left behind during the recovery. Yes, we must change the structural injustices embedded into our society that cause this pattern to repeat again and again. But in tandem, we must champion sustainability in order to preserve the natural resources that can provide relief and support to African American men and women in need. As we advocate for change in the world at large, we also have to ensure that our own house is in order. The values that we preach are also the values that we must practice ourselves. Since we aspire for Howard to serve as an example for what the world can be, we must ensure that we are embodying all of the principles on our campus that we are trying to enshrine outside of it. We advocate for diversity and work to realize it ourselves. We advocate for equity and strive to provide it within our walls. We advocate for justice and ensure that our own practices meet the standards we set for fairness. And the same must be true for sustainability. So even while Howard's in-person footprint was dramatically reduced during the coronavirus pandemic, our campus was still under renovation. We have been busy installing solar panels, retrofitting our buildings to become more energy efficient, replacing older and less efficient lighting systems, and more. In order to make our campus more sustainable and environmental friendly for the long term, we had to act now, even if there weren't people around to immediately benefit from these enhancements. There are measures we can all take right now to be more sustainable. We have technological solutions to mitigate the harm and undo some of the damage we have already done. But there's so much more that we need to do that has yet to even be conceived. Howard is also working to develop the ideas and solutions to make broader progress on sustainability and environmental justice across society. To develop robust solutions, we have to bring to the table a diversity of well-rounded leaders. At Howard, we ensure that our students aren't just developing technical expertise, but are understanding the context in which they are going to put those skills to use and the purpose for which they are going to use them. The Howard Energy and Environmental Law Society, HEALS, is a group devoted to both environmentalism and social justice, and demonstrating how the two are intimately connected and irrevocably intertwined. And they are demonstrating how their technical expertise as lawyers can help them obtain much needed environmental victories. But they also have to understand environmentalism as much as they understand law. They are driving their educations forward with a clear direction and a specific purpose. I like to picture this group huddling together in the library before the pandemic and meeting on Zoom during it, just as the group that argued Brown versus Board of Education did before them. I'm sure they're going to come up with the legal theory that will revolutionize environmental law. And that's exactly what all of you are going to do over the course of the next week. You will put your heads together to come up with ideas that have never been thought of before. I hope the backdrop of Howard inspires you toward excellence. To all of you who are participating today, I wish you the best of luck during the hackathon. No matter the outcome, you are furthering knowledge and ideas in one of the most critical areas that we must address for the welfare of our society and our planet. I commend you all for your devotion to righteous causes and your dedication to using your exceptional skills in the pursuit of a higher purpose. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Ruth Davis, Director of Call for Code at IBM, who will introduce the theme and challenge details. Good luck.
Thank you, President Frederick. My name is Ruth Davis, and I am the IBM Director of Call for Code. I am so excited to be here today. Thank you to the many students that are with us from around the world. Thank you, Howard University, for hosting this event. I'd like to also thank the Clinton Foundation and CGIU. We are so excited to be with you today and to talk about Call for Code. I'll give you some history of Call for Code, and I'll also talk to you about why we're here today, the 2021 Call for Code University Challenge. So what is Call for Code? Call for Code was the brainchild of David Clark of David Clark Cause. His feeling was that the talent of developers across the world could be used to leverage technology for good. He needed a partner to make that happen, and he came to IBM with our cutting-edge technology as well as our commitment to tech for good. We became the founding partner and have been with Call for Code since its inauguration in 2018, along with the United Nations Human Rights Organization, and our platform is open source, and our solutions are deployed on the Linux Foundation platform. Call for Code invites developers and problem solvers from around the world to use their skills to create solutions that address our most pressing societal problems. We are always on and available to support these solutions. And what is so different about Call for Code is that it's not just the development of the solutions, but our focus is on deploying the solutions in the communities, touching the individuals that they were designed to help. We have expanded our program to not only have an annual global challenge such as this one, we have the University Challenge that is also global, and we have spot challenges to address urgent issues that occur. And we'll talk a little bit about that, as we did have a few in 2020. And Call for Code for Racial Justice is an ongoing solution area for us, and other open source projects that we deploy throughout the year. We couldn't do any of this without a broad ecosystem of sponsors and supporters, including over 400,000 developers from 179 nations that have developed 15,000 applications around our most pressing societal issues. Let's look at what has happened through the years. We began with a focus on natural disasters and how we can prepare ourselves in the event of those disasters. So the first project, our winning solution, stands for Organization, Whereabouts, and Logistics, and it helps connect in limited communication situations first responders. So think Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, where power was out for such an extended period and the need was so great for communication. Then in 2019, again, we focused on natural disasters, but this time on the individuals impacted by that. And the winning solution there was Prometeo. They came up with a solution based on a team of not only developers, but a nurse and a firefighter, so that they could predict the toxicity in the air during fires. Think the Australian wildfires or the fires in California as an example, to protect the firefighters on the front lines. And then in 2020, we focused on climate change. That was at the top of the year, and that winning solution was Agrily, actually a team of students that came together in the global challenge and focused on the impact of climate on crops and crop production, particularly in rural areas, and developed an app where the farmers could figure out how to optimize their crop production based on weather trends and data from the weather company. So that is an excellent application that is in use today. And of course, 2020 was a year of change. And I mentioned spot challenges. So we did do a spot challenge in 2020 around the pandemic. So multiple solutions were developed around COVID-19. One example listed here, SafeQ, allows you to be notified via an app when a store has the capacity to allow you in and keep you in a safe, socially distanced manner, as an example. And then in May of 2020, we all remember when the world witnessed the tragic death of George Floyd. And as many others felt pain, our IBM team also felt pain and wanted to turn that pain and frustration into action and leveraged the Call for Code platform to develop solutions that would make a difference to combat systemic racism. And I'll spend just another minute talking about the Call for Code for Racial Justice Solutions. The team that came together, over 500 Black IBMers and their allies from Red Hat and IBM Research and from our development teams. And I'd also like to mention that it was not just our distinguished engineers that have been with IBM for years, but also new hires 6 months into IBM, all came together and worked on an internal challenge with Call for Code under 3 key areas that they wanted to address: police and judicial reform and accountability, diverse representation, as well as policy and legislation reform. And 7 solutions are now available on the Linux Foundation platform. And I'll just highlight a few. Open sentencing as an example. We know that Blacks are not only arrested more often, but when sentenced, they are sentenced more harshly than their white peers for the exact same crime. The open sentencing solution looks for trends in data and detects the bias in the sentencing process. So let's think about a public defender that is resource strapped, and he has an app when he's trying to defend his client that will give him the most reasonable sentencing data that should be used equitably for that given client. So that is such an impact that this particular solution can make for individuals in our communities. Under diverse representation, we have a solution called Take Two. Now, Take Two seeks to mitigate bias, both overt and subtle, in digital content. It takes a look at titles and headlines, as well as web content and blog content. We use it internally with our developer organization that generates hundreds of pieces of documents weekly. And that will make sure that our language that is used in our documents and content is inclusive. Under policy and legislation reform, Truth Loop is an example. Many of us are not aware of the impact of local legislation on our daily lives. Truth Loop brings that data and that legislative information in layman's terms to individuals so that they can see the impact of their votes and the impact of the legislation that's being decided upon in their given communities. So all of these solutions are impactful for not only individuals, but communities overall. So if you're inspired, I urge you to go to our website and see how you can get involved in these solution areas. Now, to why we're all here, the 2021 Global University Challenge. We have picked for 2021 the theme of climate change once again. It continues to be such a pressing issue that affects so many of us in so many different ways around the world. It is very broad, however. So we decided to work with our experts, and we looked at the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals and focused on 3 key sub-themes. One is clean water and sanitation. You would think that the availability of water should be a right. The availability of clean water should be a right, but that is not the case. So we want to make sure that we leverage technology and look at solutions that can make a difference here. And water, of course, feeds our process of farming and crop development. And we need that to be optimized as well to address the level of acute hunger that is going on in the world right now. 135 million people are still suffering from acute hunger. And we'd like to drive that to the theme of zero hunger. And third, responsible production and green consumption. So you have to recognize that our worldwide consumption and production is so tightly linked to our environment. What can we do to impact this area? What I'd like to do now is have our experts that I mentioned talk to you about where you should get started. We leveraged their knowledge over a period of weeks, working with problem solvers, experts, developers to come up with starter kits. And these starter kits have a focus in each of the three areas on a problem that is acute in nature that we believe technology can help. So it gives you some scoping in this broad area of climate change and within these three sub-themes. So with that, let's hear from the experts.
Half of the people in the world don't have access to clean water on a regular basis. A quarter of the people in the world don't have clean water for cooking and washing. There's probably about half of the hospital beds in the world could be made empty if we just had clean water more readily available.
So we were working on the United Nations Sustainability Development Goal number 6, which is looking to improve access to drinking water, reduce water waste, incentivize better usage of water, protect natural resources, and mitigate or try to mitigate weather-related impacts.
We see the opportunity here to use technology in some simple ways that's readily accessible to people around the world to help people to have quick and ready access to the water.
Our solutions focused on the ability to provide really a centralized means to access data that will both enable community members to accurately and efficiently access clean water, while also educating the community on clean water and sanitation for the sustainable and scalable solution.
We use technologies like IoT to pick up sensor data. We also use AI, technologies like natural language processing with our chatbots who are using Watson Assistant, and text summarization. The external technologies we use are the water quality databases and API, with the water sources databases and API also.
We're also looking to collect data as well, so using IoT devices which will be able to feed data back into the system with regards to the quality of the water, the cleanliness of the water. Labs who analyze the quality of the water in those areas and regions, for them to be able to have a platform where they can actually upload and make this information publicly available.
And possibly leveraging gamification and badging, along with maybe embedded virtual whiteboards to support program activities. So students would go through this program, they would access a repository for clean water resources and meet certain criteria to progress.
Coming up with solutions to help people to make better use of water right now is an investment in the long-term future of billions of people all over the world.
Our starter kit leverages data on weather, markets, and logistics to improve the profitability and productivity of independent farmers around the world. The problem at hand is hunger. Almost 9% of the global population is suffering from hunger. So the United Nations have their Sustainable Development Goal to achieve zero hunger by 2030. To do that, we need regular access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food for everyone. Much of the world's food is grown by small-scale independent farmers and then distributed through local community cooperatives. These cooperatives are a central point for things like quality control, deliveries, and getting the food to the right people. And they face some logistical challenges with that. And the goal with this data kit is to allow developers to build apps that help these cooperatives and the small-scale farmers to improve their productivity and profitability by leveraging some key data sets. So we have to keep in mind that the farmers themselves don't always have access to the technology and devices. So we're focusing on digitizing these cooperatives with a digital cooperative management system. The idea is to move them away from paper-based ledgers to be able to automate and analyze things digitally. And that will allow the co-ops to more easily buy and sell food, manage the crop yields, automate quality control, and knowledge share between the cooperatives.
Our solution allows farmers to capture their product yields with their cell phone cameras and feed that data into IBM Cloud Pak for Data AI and machine learning models via the Twilio and Telstra messaging API integrations. This will finally allow cooperatives to capture and analyze data from the product yields for their farmers and allow them to provide solutions and resources to maximize productivity and profitability. I would like to see developers take this idea of a digital cooperative management system and really push the limits of their imaginations to see what they can do to support local farmers and cooperatives who have limited access to technology. Remember, you are not your users. These farmers don't have access to smartphones and devices like we do. So how can we support them in innovative ways, working with the technologies they do have access to and use day to day? What are some creative ways co-ops can test product yields for quality? How are co-ops receiving and filling orders? How are these products being transported? How can you integrate public services data specific to each region? And how can we create a more simple and transparent system to answer all of these questions? You're about to embark on a journey to build something that has the potential to drastically change and improve people's quality of life, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Think about what's happening on our planet today. Economic production is having a destructive impact on our planet. We are relying on natural resources for the goods we are producing. But today we're doing this in an unsustainable way. So within our starter kit, we want to look at opportunities for building goods in a more sustainable way with less impact to our planet.
And our take on the problem is an approach of a circular economy, which is based on the principles of weeding out the waste and pollution by keeping the products and materials in use and regenerating the natural systems.
There's not a single platform that brings together those waste recyclers and producers. So there is an opportunity to bring this together, share the knowledge, and get better prices, be more competitive.
So what we want to do is, create a transparent and trustworthy platform for trading that we can not only trade resources there, but also, knowledge with access to a community of experts. We want to be enabling producers and consumers to build and buy products in a sustainable way for our society.
So Kubernetes technology will allow us to easily scale this application when demand and usage increases. Additionally, we want to leverage IBM's Watson capabilities for automatically searching, indexing, processing data that is available in the system.
We have a React app with communication to the backend APIs. We have the backend handling data requests by the web app and exposing, public endpoints for material market data through a RESTful API.
And we want to enable every local, smaller producer, the thousands of local producers to consume recycled materials and build goods in a more sustainable way so we can have less impact on our planet and use less natural raw resources.
Welcome back. That was certainly inspiring, and I hope that you are now ready to answer the call. I cannot wait to see the ideas and solutions that you all will come up with. And now, as we move forward in the program, I'd like to welcome my IBM colleague, IBM Fellow John Kuhn. He will moderate a panel discussion around innovation, equity, and climate change, building community for disaster resilience. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm John Kuhn, the IBM Fellow at the MIT IBM Watson AI Lab, and I am so psyched to be part of the kickoff for the Call for Code State of the University Challenge. I am a huge nerd and really love what you're going to be doing this weekend. I want to welcome you all to our panel on innovation, equity, and climate change about achieving community disaster resilience and environmental justice. We are so honored today to have two wonderful panelists. I want to introduce them both. First, I'd like to introduce Mami Mitsutori, who's the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. We're very, very honored. Prior to joining the UN, Ms. Mitsutori was Executive Director of the Sainsbury Institute of the Study of Japanese Arts and Culture in East Anglia, UK. And before that, she served for 27 years in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs with a wide number of capacities, including Budget Director, Director of the Japan Information and Culture Center in London Embassy, and Director of the National Security Policy Division, as well as several other posts. I understand that Mami graduated in law from Hitotsubashi University, Tokyo, where she got a law degree and then a diploma in international studies in the Diplomatic School of Spain. I understand that she's taught courses in governance all over the world and is fluent in Japanese, Spanish, and English. So it's very impressive. And Mami and her husband live currently in Geneva, Switzerland, and we're so pleased to have you here, Mami. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Delighted to be here.
That's great. And I'd like to introduce our other panelists, my friend and colleague, Dr. Stacy Hobson, who is the director of the Responsible and Inclusive Technologies Group at IBM Research. Dr. Hobson's research has spanned multiple areas, including topics such as addressing racial and social inequities, AI transparency, governmental crisis management, and risk modeling for financial services. Dr. Hobson has authored more than 20 peer-reviewed publications and holds 16 patents. She earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from South Carolina State University, a Master's of Science degree in Computer Science from Duke, and a PhD in Neuroscience and Cognitive Science from the University of Maryland at College Park. And she feels very fortunate to have the opportunity to use her expertise as a scientist to address problems that matter to the world, and in particular for people in historically underrepresented communities. So thank you so much for being here, Stacy.
Thank you, John, and I'm really glad to be here with both you and Mami for this panel.
Oh, it's so great. So on to the panel. So to set it up, everyone knows the world is facing an urgent climate crisis. You know, we see more and more frequent and dangerous hurricanes, heat waves, earthquakes, and wildfires. It's really mind-boggling, and while it is a scientific challenge around how we model climate, et cetera, it's also a social challenge. So we really need to focus on community prevention and adaptation, and we're looking at populations that are forced to handle these extreme weather events with very minimal support and facing longstanding economic disparities and social divides. So in this session, we're going to look at the intersection of social equity in disaster risk reduction and response, and the importance of bringing all communities onto the table. So with that, let me start with you, Mami, if that's okay. Environmental injustice manifests in many different ways, but it's really interesting to see what is the intersection of these extreme climate events, and how do they disproportionately affect marginalized communities?
Thank you, John. So to start with, we know that during the past 20 years, compared to the previous 20 years, both the number of and intensity of disasters related to extreme weather events have doubled, mainly floods and storms, but also heat waves and drought. And what we need to first know at the country level, the countries which have least contributed to these disasters are being hit the most, because you need to look at the economic loss from a disaster like a hurricane cyclone, storm, in proportion to their GDP. And what happens is that many low-income, middle-income countries and small island developing states, when they are hit, the whole GDP of a year is wiped away. And so they are disproportionately impacted compared to their very, very little or almost nil contribution. And those who are most vulnerable in these at-risk countries are the most hit. We know that disasters can hit everybody equally, well, not equally, can hit everybody in the same region or country, but not equally. And the poor, the women, the children, the youth, people living with disabilities, these are the people who are vulnerable. And we know that the risk drivers are poverty, informal urbanization. A hazard doesn't have to become a disaster. It becomes a disaster when it is combined with these social issues. So definitely, I would say that these environmental disasters, it is an intersection between environmental disasters and social injustice.
That's interesting. Stacy, do you have a take on that coming from the social justice side?
Yes. So Mommy mentioned flooding and hurricanes, and this is an example that I want to dive into a little bit more. Low-income communities often lack the infrastructure to prevent or reduce the impact of flooding induced by, torrential rains or hurricanes. I live in the U.S., and an example that comes to mind is Hurricane Katrina, which hit the Gulf Coast and the Louisiana region in 2005. It caused about $125 billion of damage, but one of the kind of causes of the damage was actually related to structural design or engineering of the levees. Because the levees were not engineered to withstand the flooding, once the hurricane hit, the flooding, really reached the levees and really impacted the communities. So you're talking about loss of life, you're talking about loss of businesses, of homes, and so on. So that's kind of one aspect of the damage. But then you think about, over time, issues like mold growing in, abandoned buildings and so on as a result of the flooding. So now you have like health impacts. You have the people who are still in the community who are in, significant poverty. I think about 60% of the New Orleans population is actually Black, and another 5 to 10% is Latino. So you're talking about historically marginalized or underrepresented communities, Black and Latino communities, being affected. And then you're also talking about an area that is, probably, I don't remember the exact statistics, but from the census, you're talking 30, 40% rate of poverty in the area. So the people who live there don't have the funds to move out to other areas. So they're still living in the communities. They're being subjected to mold. They're having these health impacts. And then another impact is flooding damaging the actual land and environment. So when you think about like farmers and crops and so on, because the land has been flooded so much, it's more difficult to grow fresh fruits and vegetables. So the people who live there don't have quick access to healthy foods. So now you're eating, fast food or eating chips or, various foods that are cheaper for the people there to afford. Because again, a lot of people are living in poverty and they may not be able to pay the extra costs to have fresh fruits and vegetables or healthier foods imported from other cities. So there's so many layers of impact that, that are interwoven because of these environmental situations or these massive, hurricanes, flooding, climate-related situations, and then also because of poor design of infrastructure or facilities that should help reduce the impact of, these weather-related events.
So this is so we actually have a moral responsibility. The fact that the people being most impacted, as you both have said, are not responsible for these problems. How do we address, how do we invest in resilience? Mommy, what do you think, especially given across international boundaries where one country may be disproportionately causing the problem, impacting a smaller company. How do we get that social justice addressed financially? I mean, how does what would you propose as in either a cross country or and I'll ask you, Stacy, sort of in a urban setting, how would we do that? How do you propose?
So this is precisely why in 2015, when the member states of the UN, they adopted the Paris Agreement, they committed legally to $100 billion a year to the developing countries so that these countries can not only mitigate climate emergency, but adapt to it. And that promise has not been fulfilled yet. The same comes with disaster risk reduction. There's a global agreement called the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which was adopted during the same year. And one of the targets of this document is to enhance international cooperation. And it is logical that we have these things in these documents because, as I mentioned, these countries which are impacted did not cause the problem, but they are disproportionately impacted. And they have many more other needs that they need to allocate their budget to. Basic education, feeding the people. They don't have the means or the money to put into disaster risk reduction, which is prevention. We know that if you prevent better, you can recover better, but there are day-to-day needs that needs to be fulfilled. So really, in order to fill this gap of injustice, the developed countries need to live up to their commitment. That is what the Secretary General says every time he addresses the issue of climate emergency.
What are the main barriers to making good on those commitments? Is it political?
Well, I would say that some countries see it as a political thing. Some countries which may not believe in climate emergency, which I think the number is growing smaller and smaller, they may not feel that they need to give financing for this. But also the other thing is that the need for international cooperation for all sorts of things is just getting bigger and bigger. Humanitarian assistance, not only for climate emergency, but for conflicts and whatnot, or sometimes a combination of this. And so even with the best intention of a lot of the donor countries, the gap that needs to be filled is getting bigger and bigger. What we need to do here in terms of climate is to really prevent better so that hazards don't turn into disasters. And the humanitarian need will be less. In this way, in the long term, we can reduce the amount. But in the meantime, we do need to keep the commitment. And I do think that it is probably a combination of political, but also the fact that developed countries themselves are finding a lot of needs in their own countries that they need to fill. And I'm afraid the COVID-19 situation is actually making this situation worse.
Yes. So, Stacy, we just heard Mommy talk about how these situations play out between countries, sometimes between rich and poor countries. You had talked about Katrina and how that had happened just inside one country in the United States, and you had implied that that poor engineering solutions in impoverished areas had led to this. Are there been any lessons from that are coming out?
I'm not sure of the exact lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina and what happened there, but I think there are two fundamental sort of areas that we really need to focus on. And I think one is more around awareness. So people should be aware of the potential for the impact of, severe weather events or the impact of climate-related situations on communities, on individuals, on, societies and so on. And I think the second is around commitment. So John, you mentioned earlier, sort of social responsibility and should we be focused on social responsibility? And I think that's really critical as well. So I talked a little bit about Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, but let me elevate this a bit to, following on with Mommy's comments around like sort of the global nature of these situations. I read an article recently about how wealthy countries have been exporting trash and plastics and so on to Malaysia and other developing nations. And this was very surprising to me. I had not been aware of this previously. And now that I know about this, I am concerned that this is happening, because here in the US, we've had this focus of reduced usage of plastics, or the impact of landfills on the communities that are surrounding the landfills, the health impacts, the environmental impacts, and so on. So as we begin to export trash to other countries, now we see that those impacts are going to be felt by the people living and working in those communities as well. So there's a global kind of need for focus on some of these issues. And Mommy mentioned the Paris Agreement, and we've just recently rejoined the Paris Agreement. So there has to be cooperation amongst nations, amongst individuals, amongst communities, societies, and so on, to address these issues as a global society, as the world. So I think that's really, really important. And going back to my original statements of awareness and commitment, to make sure that not only are we aware, but we're trying to drive action and change and do the right thing.
That makes sense. Now, you've both given us a sense of what a heavy lift this is. And I think you just started to allude to this, Stacy, is that this takes everybody's commitment and everybody's buy-in. I guess, Mommy, what do you think the role of, governments are certainly one component, but what do you think the roles of other partnerships, for example, with NGOs or industry or other nonprofits? What is the role of that in trying to address this as a world issue?
So, John, disaster risk reduction prevention is a whole of society issue. Everybody has to be involved. Governments, they do need to have good risk governance. This means have a national or local plan for disaster risk reduction, base it on rules and regulations so that they don't change from government to government, put an institution against it, and give money to the institution so it can implement the strategies. That's the role of the government. Role of private sector. Change resilience into a commodity. Make it a business opportunity so that everybody can have it. And NGOs, local communities, what do? They need to be also part of the solution. Importantly, they need to educate yourself, your neighbors, your friends, your family about the awareness that Stacy just mentioned. Be aware of what could come and be ready to act. There are a lot of early warning systems that people don't act to, and then they die or they get affected. So that is the biggest role of the NGOs and the local community. And finally, another thing, data. We need data to find out where are the weak structures, where are the vulnerabilities. And this is, again, whole of society issue. But if the neighbors know, okay, my next door neighbor is a person living with disability, he or she needs help when something happens. That's important, right? So, and that's data as well. I would say that these are the different roles of different stakeholders, but we all need to come together.
I think this is very interesting. So even from, all the way from large governments down to individual neighbors, it makes sense. I think this point on data, Stacy, I know, through your work at IBM, I think that the interesting thing about data is you need all types of data. It's usually not from one provider. So it requires kind of an ecosystem. What do you think the role of these ecosystems are in providing both the help and the data, collecting it?
I completely agree with Mommy's points that there is the role for each of the individual groups as part of this. So going back to, organizations, I work for a large tech company. I happen to be in research. And so we have the opportunity to create technologies to help address some of these issues. And, going back to the data example, helping to collect data and make sure that the data is trusted, that the data is representative of the population or or the realities of what's happening with the situations, and also enabling tools and techniques to analyze the data to get trusted insights out of the data so that we know this is information that is reputable and here's how we should take actions to address what we're seeing or what we're learning from the data. So that's the role of like technology companies. And I completely agree with Mommy's perspective that, you know, organizations, individuals, communities have a role too from like an advocacy perspective, an awareness perspective, helping people understand what is happening on the ground, what is happening within their communities, especially for those that are not living in the communities or are 1, 2, or 3 steps removed from the communities and what they're seeing. So making people aware that these things are happening, these are the ways that the individuals in these communities are being impacted from the current environmental state or the current weather situations and so on.
That makes good sense. I think it, you know, it comes from personal passion sometimes in that. And I'd actually like to ask both of you, if I may, you know, what is it that compels you personally to take this on? This is a big, both of you have such big roles, and these are tough problems. What compels you personally? What led you to this, and what keeps you doing it, and despite the challenge? Mommy, if I could start with you.
Thank you. So my organization, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, we convene conferences, regional ones, global ones. And again, because it's a whole of society approach, everybody comes, not only governments, but private sector company, young people, people living with disability, and they are also so energized because they become part of the solution. You know, even the vulnerable people, they are not victims. They are not the people who need to be protected only. They come with their solutions. And when I see that, I really think this is what I'm doing, and it gives me energy and keeps me, you know, really the oath to keep on going.
Oh, that's great. And Stacy, what about you? What compels you to go into this, and what keeps you motivated?
For me, it's very much a personal passion and a personal commitment. I'm a Black woman. I've seen how so many examples of injustice have affected the Black community, have affected, you know, women and so on. And to read about examples of environmental injustice and how it's often impacting the Black and Latino communities or people in lower socioeconomic status, it's just atrocious to me. So I want to use my research, my, you know, personal work and my personal passion to solve some of these problems. And again, it's not just me as an individual, but going back to this ecosystem idea or working together as a collective, we have to bring together so many different people to address this. And that is what I want to do in my day job in my life. I want to help bring people together to have them become aware of these challenges and work together with me and others to solve them.
That's both of those answers are really inspiring. I think on that, as we leave, let me just, Stacy, just keep with you for a second. You know, we're about to go into this Call for Code challenge this weekend, where there's going to be hundreds of people who are actually innovating. Anything you want to say to them along the lines of inspiring, just like you inspired us?
Sure. In IBM Research, we have this saying, the world is our lab. So we look at the world and some of the challenges that we see in the world, and we try to focus our research and our scientific exploration and our technology development to solve or address challenges that we see in the world. And I think so many of you that are participating in this challenge have the same opportunity. You have the opportunity to create technology, to create code, to do work that can really address these issues and solve problems that matter to people, that matter to society, to like uplift people and make their lives better. That's a massive opportunity. And I'm really excited for you and your participation. And I look forward to see all of the great things that come out of this challenge.
Oh, fantastic. And Mommy, if you could sort of take us out here, anything you'd like to say to all of this talent that we're actually talking to right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to call for a code for prevention, right? So that we don't have to face this situation we are in again. We could have prevented this better. So please do it, and let's save the world and humanity together.
So fantastic. It's been such an honor speaking with you both, Mommy, Stacy, and really inspiring. And I want to also do a shout out to all the people who are going to be working on the call for code. You just got a great charge from our panelists. I want to just say, good luck. Go make something beautiful and help us save the world. Thank you both. Thank you all. And back to you, Ruth.
Thank you to our fantastic panel of speakers. And if you're ready to get involved, I urge you to register for Call for Code right now at the URL on your screen. Sign up for a cloud account and then head back over to developer.ibm.com/call-for-code to complete your registration. Click Join Now to join the community, and make sure you click the second box to let us know that you are a university student. And welcome to the Call for Code community. Be sure to register for the upcoming Digital Developer Conference on April 12th. It's free. At the Developer Conference, you will acquire new problem-solving and coding skills to help you fast-track the development of your Call for Code submission. For those of you participating in the Howard Hackathon for Environmental Justice, we will see you on Sunday. Thanks to all of you for your participation in the program today.